Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Nick, and today we're going to take a look at some of my favorite indie games, and hopefully you see one or two that looks interesting to you, and that you might want to give a try. Let's start off with a bit of a crash course for those of you who might be new to gaming terminology, or just haven't spent much time outside of the AAA world of games media. Feel free to skip to this timestamp if you're already familiar with what I'm talking about. So, the Wikipedia definition of an indie game is an indie game, short for independent video game, is a video game typically created by individuals or smaller development teams without the financial and technical support of a large game publisher. Essentially, what they're saying is an indie game is any game made by an independent developer. That is, a developer that isn't working with a publisher to get their game into the hands of players. Think of it like writing a book. Someone who works with a publisher is going to have a lot of advantages, but also a lot more restrictions. Whereas, someone who's working independently doesn't have those same resources, like distribution methods, marketing networks, etc. But they do have the freedom to write essentially whatever they want. And that freedom tends to lead to more interesting, unique, genre-bending ideas than the large, highly financially driven traditional publisher model. It's similar with games. Now, take everything I say with a grain of salt because I'm an outsider. I'm not an indie dev, and I've never talked to any indie devs or worked with the industry. But the general perception towards indie games among your average gamer falls in line with this model, though it does get more complicated. And as all things in life, it's not black and white. Indie game good, AAA bad. But for the most part, you find sprawling stories, huge open worlds, and also egregious microtransactions and subscription models, I'm looking at you, WoW, in the AAA space. Whereas you tend to find smaller, more tight linear experiences in the indie space. And I don't know about other people, but I've never really come across an indie game that's tried to make me buy a costume for $40. And I'm not counting DLC or game soundtracks here because, as far as I'm concerned, that's adding more actual value to the game and not holding back features and trying to make you pay for them. The most important part to me when talking about indie games and indie developers is the financial model and the attention paid to the artistic aspects of the game. In my mind, a game that tries to make you spend extra on in-game cosmetics can't really be indie. While it's certainly not impossible for an indie dev to do this, they tend not to because, for the most part, they care about the actual experience of the game rather than squeezing every last penny they can out of you. Though, it should be noted that I don't dock any points from indie devs who do have cosmetic shops in general, because I found that they really don't try to sell these cosmetics for all that much, and or they offer the option for them to be earned in-game. And in general, I'm much more accepting of a small studio trying to make money than I am of a large multinational corporation who has a yearly profit larger than that of many countries' yearly GDP doing the same. Now, recently there's been a bit of a division within the indie genre, which leads people to refer to certain games as AAA.
But it almost seems like there's this barrier and this wall where people want to say they love indies or they enjoy indies because they play Hollow Knight, but they're not willing to give indies as a whole a chance until they've proved themselves and almost until...
I love indies, but only the ones that I like.
Yeah, I like indies, but only the AAA indies in a way. Like,
yeah,
you're
only the
having
ones
this...
that everybody else likes.
It's interesting now because we've gone from like having AAAs and having indies to almost like indies being this own subsection where you have AAA indies. At least they're seen that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we call them triple I, actually. That's kind of what we talk. Yeah,
I've never heard that, and I love that I have that now.
Yeah, we're starting to call them like triple I. Like, games like Hades and Spelunky and Hollow Knight, they cost millions of dollars to make in years. How can that be indie, right? In the sense of, like, even to us, like, we're on Golf, we're only a 5 to 10 person team, depending on what stage of the project we're at. And, our game didn't cost $1 million to make.
Right.
It cost, like, a significantly less portion of that. But even then, we're fully paid staff members who work in the studio. Like, that's not true indie either. But we all compete on the same stage.
This division is actually kind of important when talking about indie games, because the more people and money a team has, the more ambitious their games can conceivably be. Though the general attitude towards these games has soured a little, as they make it pretty difficult for small teams to live up to the expectations set by massively successful games like Hollow Knight. And this really becomes an issue when we start to talk about game ratings for these indie games. After all, if the reviewer goes in expecting something on the level of Hollow Knight, but the team who made the game is comprised of 1 or 2 people, the experience will be 9 times out of 10 underwhelming. Expectations play a huge role in your impression of games, and most media for that matter, and it is argued that these AAA games mess with the first impression. But now that we're all caught up to speed on how I'm defining indie and what things I really value about indie games, let's get into my recommendations for indie games worth your time. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little bit more of an off-the-cuff, unscripted list of recommendations that I think you might enjoy if you're at all interested in delving into the world of indie games. The first on my list is Stardy Valley. Now, you've probably already heard of this one, but I do still think it's very much worth a recommendation. And it's one of the few, along with Animal Crossing, it's one of the few life sims, farming sims, island builders, you could say. It's one of the few from that genre that I actually really connect with. And I did bounce off of it a couple times when I was first attempting to play it, because it does take a little bit of time to get going, and it takes a little while to actually start to build your farm, any more than just like cutting down some trees and selling the wood. So it does take a little bit of time to get into, but I do think once you kind of push past that little bit, it is really worth your time. It's just a really nice, cozy experience that you can totally enjoy if you just sit down for 15 minutes, just do 1 day cycle at a time. You can totally enjoy it that way. And it is really flexible with how you're able to start and stop kind of whenever you want to, which, as I've made kind of clear over the past couple of videos, is actually very important to me. I like to be able to pick up and put down a game just kind of whenever, because sometimes I just have things to do and I have to squeeze in gaming time amongst all those things. And so it's really nice to be able to pick up and put down a game and not have to really have a set amount of time to play for. And this game is great for that, because not only is it low stakes, low tension, just cozy, chill vibes the whole way through. It also does give you that freedom of being able to put it down, pick it up, put it down, pick it up, and slowly make progress through the game. It's just kind of the tedium of running a farm, but like it's done in a way that makes it enjoyable and fun to play through. But yeah, I think overall, it's just a really great game to sit down and play and have a good time with, you know. The next game on my list is Tunic, and you may not have heard of this one, but it is basically kind of a Zelda-like. I think aside from Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, I think this has to be probably my favorite take / expansion on the ideas from classic Zelda. They kind of meld Zelda and a Souls game and a little bit of roguelike, and it really makes a nice combination. The combat is more complicated than just hold up your shield and smack the guy after they attack, which can get fairly repetitive in older Zelda titles. That's not to say that that's necessarily a bad method of combat, but I do enjoy and appreciate the expansion. But I think the really unique thing about Tunic is how they reimagine world exploration. You start out, and one of the first things that you find is a page to like a game manual, and it's the game manual for the game that you're playing. And all of the items, all of the road signs are all in this foreign language that you don't know. And so is the game manual. And as you start to progress through the game, you start to unlock the understanding of what these words mean. You're slowly able to read the manual, and you're slowly able to read the signs and kind of figure out where you are and where you're going. And I think it's such an interesting take on game progression. And that's, I think, one of the things that I love so much about indies is that they're able to get so creative with it. I can't see most AAA studios really wanting to experiment like that, and that's just something that I just love about indies. But yeah, I think this particular game is a really great example of how you can take a classic idea, a classic mechanics, classic game, and really reimagine it and tweak the formula to be different and unique and its own thing. Because it's really easy to look at Tunic and see, like, oh, it's Link, but he's a fox. But it's really not. Once you start playing, you realize, no, this game is its own thing. This game has its own personality, its own vibe. I think it kind of fills that niche that Zelda games fill, that exploration, adventure, fantasy niche that Zelda games fill, but it does it in its own way. And that's just something that I really respect and I really enjoy seeing in games. And I think it's definitely worth your time. So the next one on my list you've actually probably heard of also. It's Vampire Survivors. The description is that it's a action roguelike bullet hell. And honestly, it's just a super fun game to zone out to. All vibes, no plot, and it's honestly just really fun. For anybody who enjoys the retro pixel art aesthetic and the kind of Castlevania look and feel, it takes that kind of aesthetic, that vibe, and it puts it into what is essentially, kind of your mobile game-esque gameplay where you're not actually like pressing any buttons or making anything happen. You're just moving your guy around the screen, and then you have kind of passive effects which will attack these swarms of enemies who are trying to get to you. And it's just, honestly, it creates such an interesting feeling and such a fun feeling of like, oh, I almost died there. Oh. You can get really wrapped up in kind of the close calls that are created by that kind of gameplay. And I think this one has gotten the media attention that it honestly deserves. I think it deserves the praise that it got. So much so that it's spurred its own kind of subgenre of clones. So yeah, if you're looking for, if you're in the mood for just like a zone out, chill, shut your mind off, gameplay focused indie game, I think this one scratches that itch pretty well. The next entry on my list is Cloudpunk, and this is a personal favorite of mine, not only because it's an amazing game and I actually played through the whole thing, which doesn't happen a lot, and so when I do that, it really sticks in my, those games really stick in my mind. There's only a couple games that I actually am able to play all the way through, because oftentimes games will just lose me. But that's not the point. The point is, not only a great game because I finished it, but it's a great game because my girlfriend actually liked it. So not only does that have personal value to me, but I wouldn't say that she is a gamer, and I wouldn't say that she's highly discerning when it comes to the games that she likes. I would just say she doesn't like many games. And you know what? Fair. But for somebody who is just desperately trying to get my girlfriend to play games with me, this means a lot to me personally. But outside of my own personal feelings towards the game, it is also just an amazing game. It's got a really great story. It's thought-provoking. It's interesting. It's intriguing. It asks questions about kind of existence and usual cyberpunk meditations on life and technology and all of that fun stuff. But it also delves a little bit into art, which I think is actually a really interesting direction to take it, which is particularly relevant today. But it also has just really interesting, really gripping gameplay. Flying around your hover car in this beautiful city, listening to music and talking to your dog. It's just a great time, and you get so connected to the characters and the story, and that's something a lot of games seem to have a problem doing, at least for me. And I find this difficult in most stories. I don't get connected to characters in stories in general super easily. But yeah, so honestly, just a really great story, really great characters, really great world. And it's just something that it's a unique breath of kind of fresh air for me in the gaming world. Cloudpunk really does what it's aiming to do, like not many other games that I've ever played. And it's a great time. I think if you're at all interested in actual cyberpunk, not Cyberpunk 2077, if you're actually interested in the kind of meditations of what is actually being contemplated by cyberpunk and the genre, Cloudpunk is honestly, in that regard, better than Cyberpunk 2077. It does the themes and the ideas way better, in my opinion. I'm just saying, it's fun to shoot stuff and run around and throw grenades, but I don't know. I just think Cloudpunk did it better. The next game on my list, my personal list, is Lunacid. Now, if you're a regular viewer of The Iron Pineapple, well, I'll go ahead and link to, you'll be familiar with Lunacid. It's a really beautiful PS2 style Souls Kingsfield-like game for the modern era. Honestly, I don't have much in the way of personal experience with Kingsfield. I wasn't playing Souls games, back in the day or anything. I have appreciation for the Souls genre, and this kind of takes it back to its roots and really mostly focuses on the exploration aspect. The combat in Lunacid is not particularly difficult. It's much more of a Kingsfield-like than it is of a Souls-like. In fact, I would say it's only Souls-like in the fact that it is a Kingsfield-like, given that Kingsfield was the first inklings, the first ideas of what Souls games eventually became. Mostly just a Kingsfield-like. So if you're just looking for a gothic, existential, fantasy, vibey, just dripping with energy and intrigue, if you're looking for a game like that, Lunacid is absolutely killer. It will satisfy you to no end. Unfortunately, it's only on PC, so yeah, you have to have a PC to do it, but I think it's pretty good. The next one is Project Warlock. If you like classic Doom, but don't love how old the controls and everything about it is, this will be great for you. I personally love every version of Doom, maybe except for 3, but I just can't get enough Doom, and Project Warlock totally scratches that itch. But it makes it does put its own kind of twist on it. It keeps the sprite-based style. Hello? It keeps the sprite-based style, but it makes it much more dynamic. All I can really think to describe it as is like the original Doom games feel a little fuzzy, and this is like if you just tune that focus in exactly right. All the pixels are extremely sharp, all the sprites extremely sharp, and it's just a fun time. They got really great, what's it called? Like particle effects. It's got really interesting lighting and effects and audio. It's just it scratches that same itch that Doom scratches, but just updated a little bit. You know, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go play Doom. I think absolutely you should. It's one of those classic games that you should go back and play and give it a try. But if you do that and you find that you like those old games, this just adds to it. Next on the list, and we're almost there, is Blasphemous 1 and 2. I've only played 1, and I haven't gotten particularly far because I'm not very good. With how far I have gotten, it just all of the movements, the attacks, the sounds, the environments, it's all just so satisfying and so vibey. It's got this interesting gothic, very Christian vibe. And while I'm not able to comment too much on the story because, again, I haven't gotten very far because it's very hard, I've heard that it does have pretty interesting commentary on religion and death and life and, you know, dedication to things outside of yourself and all of that fun stuff. And I think it's just a really great example of how you can take something like a Souls-like and mix it with a platformer and have something that's like just a good time. What more can I say? You know, Souls-like, but also Mario. They're great, and also a little bit of Metroidvania. Next up is Valheim, and this is also very well known. At least, I don't know. I keep saying that. I'm not 100% sure if they're actually very well known. I think in the circles that I run in on the internet, they're very well known. They're on like every list that I've watched. But I don't know. Let me know if they're actually that well known to you, or if I am just within that small circle who really loves these games. But the circles I'm familiar with, Valheim is very well known, and it's very well known for a good reason. I don't know, how do you explain a survival crafting game? It doesn't have a story. It's mostly just, it's all vibes. And the stories kind of emerge through your gameplay, and that makes games really, really fun to play. And I really liked it. I really like that about Valheim. It's not anything too revolutionary. The graphical style is really unique and really interesting. It's like, it looks really low resolution, and it looks really like bad, but when you're actually playing it, it's just all so seamless, and it all just works really, really well. It is better than it looks. Just keep that in mind. You'll see a lot of gameplay of it and stuff, and you'll be like, ew, that game looks like crap. Like, it looks like it's 720p is ridiculous. But when you actually play the game, you realize just how actually detailed it is. Cutting down trees, for one, is just probably the most satisfying tree cutting mechanic I have ever seen in any game ever, and I can't get enough of it. Yeah, highly recommended as well, as all of these are, because they're on my recommendations list. So, yeah. The last game that I want to talk about is Eastward. So I'm still working on playing through this one, but I'm really loving the direction that it's headed in. It's a unique blend of like RPG and Zelda-like dungeon crawlers. Many reviewers seem to have given it a pretty favorable score, and I personally really love where it's headed, and the relative simplicity of the difficulty makes for a really fun time with a variety of different gamers. It's got a really interesting story, really unique ideas and characters, and it also likes to kind of play with the meta of games and the gaming world, and it's compelling, and I think a really good example of what indie games can be and where we should be kind of aiming to go with indie games. Yeah, it's a good time, you know? I hope I helped shed some light on maybe 1 or 2 new games for you, and maybe I just got you excited to play or replay an old favorite. Either way, I hope I made it clear just how important indie games are to the gaming world. While I admit they definitely aren't all for me, I do think they are more than worth the money, because you're not only helping these studios who are trying something new, but you're showing that there is actual interest in these genres, and hopefully that will help them grow and become more mainstream. After all, it's important to remember that there are real people behind all these games that we love, at least for now. And whether or not the actual gameplay is interesting to you, they have a point of view on the world, and it's important that we continue to make it a viable option to share that point of view through the medium of games. But what do you guys think about indie games? Love them or hate them? I hope you had a good time with this video. Thank you so much for watching. I know you didn't have to. Have a good day, and happy gaming.